After 4 years of war, Adolf Hitler returned to Munich, to a Germany in the throes of revolution. He was 30 years old. New opportunities now opened up before him. Above all, he wanted to remain in the army, which guaranteed order and stability for the new regime of the Social Democrat president Friedrich Ebert. The young German Republic had to deal with the Marxist revolutionary movement, the Spartacus League, whose members were trying to seize power just like the Bolsheviks had in Russia 2 years before. The army crushed them, aided by volunteer nationalists known as the Free Corps, a recruiting ground for the future Nazi Party. Hitler served in the army with great zeal. His primary goal was to keep a roof over his head, for which he'd stoop to anything. He became a provocateur, an informer, denouncing comrades he suspected of being Reds. His superior officers, whose duties included combating radical communist ideas, were impressed with his anti-revolutionary fervor. They gave Hitler a mission: to politically re-educate returning German soldiers and prisoners of war. Hitler's commanding officer wrote, "He's a natural-born orator. His fanaticism and populism captivates listeners, forcing one to think as he does." Hitler said, "At that moment, I understood that I knew how to speak." Next, he learned how to use theatrical effects in order to dominate his audience. This 1933 film, with its original soundtrack, shows his ability to build a sense of drama. From his beginnings, Hitler knew how to handle an audience and to feed his listeners with exactly what they wanted to hear. In 1919, he denounced the national shame of the Treaty of Versailles. After months of discussions among themselves, the victors, France, Britain, and the United States, imposed harsh peace terms on Germany, as if it alone were responsible for the massive carnage. The Treaty of Versailles, signed on the 28th of June 1919, condemned Germany to pay enormous reparations, which placed an immense burden on the economy and became a central issue in Germany's popular grievances. Germany also saw 13% of its territories and 1/10 of its population taken from it. Alsace-Lorraine once again became French, and the Rhine's entire left bank was demilitarized. A German film of the period mocked the carving up of the national territory. The worst was the separation of East Prussia from Germany to reconstitute Poland, partitioned in the 18th century, giving it access to the sea. The Polish Corridor would be the spark that ultimately ignited the Second World War. For many Germans, the Allies' demand that the paramilitary anti-revolutionary forces must be disarmed added insult to injury. The German people witnessed the destruction of their submarines, their battleships, and their air force. Germany's army was reduced to 100,000 men. Hitler, against his wishes, was demobilized into Bavaria, a region in upheaval, where right-wing extremist groups were multiplying. Here he was filmed for the first time, during a demonstration of the DAP, the German Workers' Party. In 1919, the army had ordered him to infiltrate and spy on this group. But now he remained a member and developed into a full-time political agitator. Politically, Bavaria was on the far right, whereas power in Berlin was with the center-left Weimar Republic, named after the city where the new constitution had just been voted into law. Hitler, now transformed from an Austrian into a dyed-in-the-wool Bavarian, howled with rage against the November criminals, the signatories of the armistice and of the shameful Versailles Treaty. These sentiments were shared by the army, especially by the war veterans who gathered in Munich's large beer halls. One of these is the Bürgerbraukeller, where on August 13, 1920, Hitler made his political debut with a lecture entitled "Why Are We Anti-Semitic?" For Hitler, the answer, beyond his intense hatred for the Jews since the German defeat, is that anti-Semitism was the best strategy for attracting nationalist militants. Hitler galvanized the radicals of his small right-wing extremist group. They made him their leader and equipped him with a car, evidence of his importance. Hitler changed the party's name, associating the terms national and socialism. His goal was to create a much wider appeal and to show his anti-capitalist stance. The DAP was now the NSDAP, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the abbreviated form of which is Nazi. In his small headquarters in a Munich beer hall, he drew his party's emblem. He wrote in Mein Kampf, "After innumerable attempts, I chose a red flag to show our movement's social dimension, with a white circle representing our nationalism, and the swastika, symbol of the Aryan, the eternal anti-Semite." To protect their meetings, he created the SS Stormtroopers, his assault unit, a small militia whose uniforms he obtained from the stock of the former Austro-Hungarian Customs Office. His radicalism increased the party's membership from 2,000 to 20,000, growing tenfold in a single year. He succeeded with the help of a racist sect, the Thule Society, named after a legendary Nordic kingdom. Its members financed a newspaper. This publication became the official Nazi Party newspaper under a new title, Volkscher Beobachter, the racist People's Observer. Its editor, Alfred Rosenberg, was a member of the Thule Society and acted as the theoretician of anti-Semitism. Confused, if not deranged, he would become an important inspirer of Nazi philosophy. Another former member of the Thule Society during his student days was Rudolf Hess. He went on to become Hitler's secretary and one of his most servile and fanatical accomplices. Another addition to the ranks of the early militants was a First World War hero, Hermann Göring, one of Germany's most celebrated fighter pilots. Like many other veterans, he had difficulty readapting to civilian life. In Hitler, he found someone who articulated his own anti-revolutionary ideas. Göring would become the number 2 of the Nazi regime and an instigator of the concentration camps. In 1922, at a political march, Hitler placed Göring next to General Ludendorff, still wearing his spiked helmet, to show the veterans that their great wartime chief supported the Nazis. Ludendorff, one of the most senior German generals from the war, was convinced that the politicians had denied him his victory. The theory was shared by many German generals. Ludendorff's support for nationalist ideas opened up new perspectives for Hitler. Everything seemed possible. In Italy, the extreme right, Benito Mussolini's fascist party, had just seized power. Will Hitler be the German Mussolini? 1923 will be the decisive year.